Hey everybody, it's your host, Late here, and we're back with another chapter of Charlie Bone and the Blue Boa, Chapter 11, Bull, Bells, and Golden Bats. Before I start, I'm going to try to make this the last time, if not the next one. If you enjoy what you've heard, you really want to hear more, please, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Leave a comment to let me know that you've liked what's been going on, and of course, join any one of the memberships for early access and to help grow the channel because that's why we're here, right? You guys have been great. Love some of the feedback you've already sent, and glad that a lot of people were really happy to see this come back. So here we go. As he made his way to the steep hill to his home, Lysander began to feel breathless. This had never happened before. He was a strong boy, tall for his age, a great runner, and champion hurdler. It was the drums that took away his breath. That's what it was. Their angry beats echoed in his head like distant thunder, making him shudder. Trouble! Called Homer from his master's shoulder. Yeah, trouble, Lysander agreed. He had just climbed the steepest part of the hill road, a long curving ascent that ended in a welcome stretch of even ground. Here he stopped and looked out across the city. The cathedral, with its great domed roof, dwarfed all the other buildings in the city. Only the shadowy mansion to the north was anywhere near as tall. Bloors, Lysander muttered. Beyond the gray roof of the academy, and just at the edge of the wood that covered the castle ruin, there issued a thin plume of smoke. When he saw it, Lysander's eyes began to smart. His skin burned, his throat felt raw. Tearing at his collar, he ran the last few meters home. He reached a pair of tall iron gates and pulled one open. He tore up the path to an imposing white house, set behind lawns as green and as smooth as billiard tables. Mrs. Jessamine Sage was watching a quiz show on TV when her son went pounding up to his room. Mrs. Sage knew her son's trouble immediately. She could hear the drums accompanying his footsteps. It was from her that Lysander had inherited its power. At certain times, she too heard the drums speak and the ancestors clamoring for attention. Mrs. Sage levered herself up from her comfortable chair. She was a well-rounded woman of considerable strength, and she had been feeling heavy and listless of late. She didn't need drums to tell her that another baby was on its way. There were other very obvious signs. The beautiful and stately woman climbed the steps to the first floor. Behind the two doors on either side of her son's room, her daughters, aged 10 and 14, were playing loud, unmelodic music, guitars and voices. It was all squeaky, shouting, and rap, rap, rap. Not a drum beat between them. Hortense, Alexandra, reduce! Barked Mrs. Sage in such a commanding tone that both girls immediately obeyed. When Mrs. Sage opened her son's door, she was met by another barrage of sound. This one is tumultuous. It almost knocked her back onto the landing. Lysander, calm, she called. Mrs. Sage crossed the room. She never used two words, or even five for that matter, where one would do. Lysander was lying on his bed with his eyes tight shut and his hands over his ears. Even so, he heard his mother's powerful voice. He opened his eyes. Think of a tree, sang Mrs. Sage. Roots, leaves, branches, holding, lifting, sky. Think of the king. Lysander removed his hands from his ears. There, said his mother, lowering herself onto the bed. Better? It worked every time. As soon as Lysander thought of a tree, as soon as he saw in his mind's eye the mysterious painting in the king's room, he felt calmer. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. The drum beats were still there in his head, but now quiet enough for him to think. Tell, said his mother. Trouble! Cried Homer from his perch by the window. She didn't ask you, said Lysander with a rueful grin. There is trouble, though, he told his mother. I don't know what, but it's at Bloor's. I saw smoke, and I felt my skin burn. The ancestors are angry, Mum. They always have a reason, said Mrs. Sage. I don't want to go to school on Monday. I don't want to face whatever it is. I've never felt like this before. You must face it. Mrs. Sage patted her son's hand. You must go to school. That's what Charlie Bone said. Charlie? Yeah, the kid with the rough hair. His uncle had the party last term, remember? He's smaller than most of us, but he pushes his way into trouble and somehow find ourselves following. Tancred, me, Gabriel, he's doing it again, trying to rescue a boy from invisibility. Invisibility? Mrs. Sage frowned. I'm making a carving, Lysander went on. It's really good, Mom, the best I've ever done. I thought the ancestors would be able to bring the boy back, but the drums say no. I've done the wrong thing. Mrs. Sage stood up. Not you, Lysander. Someone else has done wrong. Go to school and put it right. She swept out of her son's room, her long flowered skirt whispering round her ankles like the sea. What a picnic! Shrieked Homer. For you, maybe, Mrs. Sage said, closing the door. On Monday morning, the reason for Lysander's terrible forebodings soon became clear. After their history test, Charlie and Fidelio, emerging from the garden, saw a group of their friends clustered round the remains of a fire. Whedon was always burning rubbish in the grounds, so this wasn't too unusual. It was the attitude of the group that alerted Charlie. Lysander was standing in stony disbelief while Tancred's stiff yellow hair sparked with electricity. Olivia, standing next to Lysander, caught Charlie's eye and gestured wildly. Charlie and Fidelio rushed over to them. Among a pile of scorched twigs and burnt paper, two blue eyes stared out at them. The eyes were all that remained of Lysander's beautiful carving. How could they? Whispered Emma. Lysander was shuddering. He held his arms stiffly at his sides, and his hands were clenched. He seemed unable to speak. Charlie noticed a group of sixth formers watching them. Asa Pike had a satisfied smile on his face, while Zelda Dobininsky's long features were twisted in a horrible smirk. Manfred, however, was staring straight at Lysander, as if he were outraged by the African's clever attempt to rescue Ollie. No one else knew, Lysander muttered. Who would? Obviously someone in art, said Olivia. Silence fell over the little group, and then almost as one of them, they looked over to the walls of the ruin where Belle and Dorcas were standing watching them. But why? Said Lysander. Because your carving was too good, said Olivia grimly. Because someone doesn't want us to rescue Ollie Sparks. Don't give up, Sander, said Charlie. You know, it's not what it looks like for him, said Tancred. You can't feel the injury, can you, Sander? It's like he put a bit of his own heart into that piece of wood. Do you know what that's like, Charlie? No, said Charlie in a small voice. I'm sorry. What's that? Fidelio rubbing his head. I can hear drums. What do you expect? Said Tancred almost angrily. Come on, Sander, let's get out of here. He grabbed his friend's arm and steered him away from the fire. Lysander seemed hardly aware of his surroundings. He allowed Tancred to lead him back towards the school, but not before Charlie, too, heard the faint throb of a drum, almost like a heartbeat, following Lysander across the grass. I didn't ask him to do it, Charlie murmured, gazing at the accusing blue eyes. He wanted to. It was his idea. It wasn't your fault, Fidelio said cheerfully. Xander will get over it. We'll just have to think of something else. It's so awful, murmured Emma. I feel like I'm looking at a real boy, or what was a real boy. Let's get away from here, said Olivia, glancing at Belle and Dorcas. We don't want them to enjoy our misery for too long, do we? As they turned away from the fire, Gabriel came leaping up to them. I've had a really weird piano lesson, he panted. It went on for ages, and he stopped mid-sentence. Oh no, he said, staring at the blue eyes. Is that Lysander's carving, said Charlie. We've got a good idea who did it. In an effort to cheer them up, Olivia announced that she'd brought a frisbee to school. Let's have a game, she suggested. While they tossed the red frisbee from one another, Gabriel told them about his strange piano lesson. Mr. Pilgrim, the piano teacher, was an odd person at the best of times, a tall, dark, morose man. He was seldom seen outside the music room at the top of the West Tower. He hardly ever spoke, and it was so difficult to get any advice from him, he had lost most of his students. During Gabriel's extended piano lesson, however, Mr. Pilgrim had said quite a lot for him. Come on, tell us, what did he say? Olivia leapt for the frisbee, losing a yellow shoe mid-leap. It was weird, said Gabriel. He said, I don't know how he got up here, but I couldn't help him. So I said, Who, Mr. Pilgrim? And he said, It's all too much. He can't take it in. Lights, traffic, plastic things. He doesn't like them. They confuse him. They'll do away with them. And who can blame him? And then Mr. P looked very hard at me and said, I can't see how he'll do it, though. Can you? I said. Gabriel caught the frisbee and yelped with pain. Ouch! That was a hard one, Charlie. Come on, cried Olivia. So what did you say? I just said, no, sir. I mean, what else could I say? You could have said, do what? Said Fidelio. A nasty thought suddenly occurred to Charlie. He stood stock still with the frisbee clutched in both hands. Come on, Charlie. Throw it, Charlie, called the others. Hold on, said Charlie. Did Mr. P describe this mysterious visitor? Gabriel shook his head. I couldn't get a name out of him either. He just said, he can, you know. He's quite exceptional. Look what he did to the music. So I looked, and do you know, all the notes on one of the sheets had turned to gold. It was Beethoven's Sonata number 27, as a matter of fact. And then I noticed that the bats in the corner, Mr. Pilgrim always had bats in his room, but he doesn't mind, nor do I. They're just like flying gerbils, really. So what had happened to the bats? Asked Fidelio, impatiently. They were gold, too, said Gabriel. Oh. Charlie felt queasy. Emma looked at him. What is it, Charlie? Nothing, said Charlie. So were the spiders, Gabriel went on blithely. And their webs. They looked really pretty, like Christmas decorations. Charlie was glad to hear the hunting horn. He was beginning to wonder what the next nasty surprise would be for him. For once, all he wanted to do was bury himself in a complicated math test. I've got a feeling you know who it is, said Fidelio, racing Charlie across the grass. Mr. P's visitor, I mean. Shh, hissed Charlie. Tell us. Go on, Charlie, tell us, cried Olivia. They piled into the hall, where Charlie was grateful for the rule of silence. He walked off to the maths room with Fidelio in tow, while the girls went to their cloakrooms, and Gabriel dragged himself up the stairs to a dreaded theory test. Charlie might have longed to bury himself in fractions, but he found he couldn't. His thought kept returning to Mr. Pilgrim's mysterious visitor. Who else would turn spiders into gold? Who else would be confused by lights and traffic? At the end of the test, Charlie knew he'd done badly. He wished he'd put the wand to work on mathematics instead of French. There was more bad news waiting for him in the canteen. One of the dinner ladies was in quite a state, having only that morning witnessed a large bull charging out of the butcher's, where before they had only been two large sides of beef hanging at the back. Beef 1 minute and bull the next, Mrs. Gill kept muttering as she handed out plates of cottage pie. What's happening to the world? What indeed, Mrs. Gill, said Fidelio with his usual charming smile. I don't think you believed her, did you? Whispered Charlie as they made their way. Well, did you? Said Fidelio. Poor old thing, she's really a fruitcake. Actually, I did believe her, said Charlie. At that moment, Gabriel joined them, saying, Have you heard what Mrs. Gill's been... Yes, we have, said Fidelio, and Charlie believes her, because he knows why and who or what. Well, why, Charlie? Why? You know that painting, Charlie said, the one I brought to school last term? Fidelio and Gabriel, with forks halfway in their mouths, stared at Charlie. You mean that one with the sorcerer? Asked Gabriel in a squeaky whisper. Charlie looked around the canteen. No one was paying any attention to them, and the noise of scraping knives and forks and chattering voices was so loud not a soul beyond their table could have heard them. All the same, Charlie lowered his voice, and he told his two friends about his visit to Scarpo and the escaped mouse. You mean you think he's gotten out? Said Fidelio. Must have, said Charlie. At first I thought it was impossible because he was still in the painting, but my uncle says that there's only his image, not his essence. I'd convinced myself that Scarpo couldn't get out because I desperately didn't want to believe it. You mean the golden bats and the bull and the other stuff is him? Said Fidelio. Must be, said Charlie. And I've a horrible feeling he's just only begun. It could get worse. And it did. The pupils in Bloor's Academy were about to go out for their afternoon break when a cloud passed over the sun, and then another, and then another. And the sky was filled with a lurid purple glow. It darkened to deep indigo, which gradually turned to black. Pitch black. A crowd of children gathered round the garden door, reluctant to be the first to step into the eerie darkness. For goodness sakes, you ninnies, sneered Zelda Dominitsky. Get out. Go on. You're not afraid of a few clouds, are you? To show her contempt for the younger children, she pushed through the crowd and took several steps into the dark garden. A toad fell on her head, and then another, and when the first toad plunked on Zelda's head, she opened her mouth. When the second one came, she gave a loud shriek and leapt back into the crowd. Then it began to rain frogs. Some of the children screamed and retreated into the hall. Others put out their hands to catch the frogs. But the slimy creatures were falling with such force there was cries of ouch, help, ow, and others. Some hands were quickly withdrawn. In the distance they could hear police sirens, ambulances, fire engines wailing around the city. Standing at the back of the crowd, Charlie's heart sank. Where was Scarpo? How on earth could he be caught, taken aback, where he was belonged? It was obviously too dangerous to play outside in the complete darkness. The lights came on in the building, and the children were sent back to their classrooms. In Charlie's case, this was Mr. Carp's English room. Mr. Carp was broad and red-faced. He kept a slim, wicked-looking cane propped behind his desk, and had been known, accidentally of course, to flick children on the ear when he was irritated. Charlie had become rather good at ducking these attacks, but he could tell from the malicious gleam in Mr. Carp's small eyes that he was determined to get Charlie one day, and Charlie thought it might be today. From the desk behind Charlie's, Fidelio whispered, "What's he gonna do next, Charlie? Got any ideas?" Charlie shook his head. In a high-pitched screech, Mr. Carp cried, "You've got half an hour to revise your Wordsworth before the test." Mindful of their ears, 20 children got out their Wordsworths and silently bent their heads. Outside, the dark clouds lifted and the sun came out. Mr. Whedon and several sixth formers could soon be observed collecting frogs in nets, boxes, and bags. Charlie wondered if frogs had fallen all over the city, or had Bloors been singled out for the favor. Through the window, he saw Manfred wiping his slimy hands on his trousers, and he smiled to himself. His smile didn't last long. Nobody thought it was unusual that the cathedral bells began to ring, but when the bells in 5 smaller churches joined in, people began to worry. Soon the sound of pealing bells resounded throughout the city, and they didn't stop. On and on and on they went. Vicars and curates, vergers, wardens, and bell ringers rushed into the churches to find the bell ropes mysteriously rising and falling all by themselves. Fidelio looked at Charlie. Charlie rolled his eyes and shrugged, and then one of the girls in the front row put her hand up. When Mr. Carp, who had his hands over his ears, took no notice, the girl, Rosie Stubbs, shouted, "Excuse me, sir, but there's an elephant in the garden." Everyone turned to look. There was. Mr. Carp, a livid glow spreading over his cheeks, lifted his cane. Rosie put her hands over her ears. The noise from the bells increased. "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, all of you!" screeched Mr. Carp. Although the class was completely silent. "I can't stand this. Who's doing it? They should be shot!" Everyone gasped. Recollecting himself, Mr. Carp shouted, "Put away your notes. Put away your books. It's no good. We can't continue. Class dismissed." The class gratefully slipped their books into their desks and filed out of the classroom into the hall. Other classrooms were emptying. Harassed-looking teachers were rushing down the halls to the staff room, black capes flapping, papers flying, books tumbling out of their arms. The children who had gathered in the hall, finding it almost impossible to observe the rule of silence, whispered and muttered their way down to the canteens, where an early tea was hoped for. Charlie and Fidelio had just managed to grab a biscuit and a glass of orange juice when Billy Raven rushed up to Charlie, saying, "You're wanted in Dr. Bloor's study." "Me?" said Charlie, turning pale. "All of us. You too, Gabriel." "All of us?" said Gabriel. "That's unusual. What on earth's going on?" And there we conclude our chapter. You guys have been great. Thank you for joining me. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, leave a comment if you really enjoyed this chapter, and of course, guys, join any one of the memberships for exclusive content. I will see you guys very soon. Take care of yourselves.